Hey y'all, we're here at Hillenburg Motorsports in Alvin, Texas. I'm with Whitney Strickland. And Whitney, we're out here checking out the shop. I want to hear a little bit about the car behind us, man. What are we looking at here?
So what this is this is a Formula Enterprise. It's a Mazda 2-liter engine, about 185 horsepower. But the car is only 1,170 pounds with me in it. So you can imagine it's only really 970 pounds with a 200-pound person in it. Goes around a little over 150 miles an hour, road racing circuits throughout America. So,
Whitney, how did you get into racing?
so I'd been into Porsches many years, had several Porsches and stuff, and then when we sold, actually my father and I sold Altair Strickland, I decided, I wanted to do a Porsche Cup car. So I was going to go out and buy a Porsche Cup car and everything. Well, before that, I had to go and get my racing license. So I went down here to MSR Houston, which isn't too far from here, to go through the class to get the license. And in the interim, I rented what was called a Spec Racer Ford at the time. And actually my wife did too. And we went ahead right after that class and bought 2 of those Spec Racer Fords. So
that's how it all started.
And that's how it all started. My wife and I both love cars and we both love racing, so we decided to do that. It's way cheaper than doing the Porsche Cup car. Actually, and to our detriment, or to my detriment, because I had sold that company. I had a lot of funds and everything, and the way I looked at it, it was a $40,000 car, pretty inexpensive. So I decided I'm just going to race the hell out of it, and if I wreck it, I'll just buy another one, And unfortunately, that led to me losing my license that first year of racing.
You lost your license? Why? The number of wrecks you had?
The number of wrecks, the number of incidents, hitting other people all mad at me, protesting me, and everything else. So literally, they put me in a room with a bunch of stewards and took my license away.
So how did you get your license back?
So it took about 6 months to get my license back. I had to, every race I went to go do, I had to get the stewards to sign off before and after the race to make sure I didn't have any incidents.
That's cool. And so what's the circuit you race on now? Yeah.
So we're racing on the Hoosier Super Tour circuit. Okay. Mainly we start in Florida at Sebring. Then we usually go to Circuit of the Americas, then maybe a race over in California, then we'll go to Watkins Glen, Road America up in Wisconsin. So it's a whole super tour type circuit.
How cool. You got a favorite track, Whitney? What's your favorite when you've been?
So actually my favorite track is not on that tour, but it's called Ozarks International Raceway, right by Lake of the Ozarks. It's a fairly new track and super fun. It's a 3.4 mile long track, very much just a hell of a lot of fun, very fast. And
so that's a long track? Like what's the average length of a track?
Yeah, usually a track is less than 2 miles, maybe 1.7 to 2 miles, so that's a pretty long track.
Cool. Anyway, well, thanks for having us out here. It's amazing. Whitney, talk a little bit more about racing relationship to kids. You volunteer your time teaching some kids how to race. Mm-hmm. Get into that, man. What do you do there?
So I do volunteer with the SCCA. Help them at MSR Houston with the instructional classes. They have if you want to go out and get your license, or you want your son or daughter to go out and get their license, they can get a racing license at 14 years old. They can go down there and do a 3-day class and be approved for actual racing on the track.
And so they start with karts?
They usually start with karts, and then after they're probably in karts for many years, they'll move up to maybe more of our level. So
on the circuit, what's the youngest person that you've competed against?
Oh, I've competed against 14-year-olds.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. The teenagers are fun. We have a little group. We're kind of older guys, but it's like we just went up to Barber Motorsports Park, me and my friend Daryl, and beat a 19 and 20-year-old. So we were pretty proud of that.
Oh, wow.
Being that he's 62 and I'm 55, so.
That's awesome. Well, thanks, Whitney. Well, let's tie this to business. Whitney, you're the CEO of TF Companies. I want to give you a second to talk that may not be familiar with your services.
Okay. So TF Companies is actually a holding company for 5 different companies. We have a specialty welding company, which is Turnaround Special Forces. Then we have a company, Tower Force, which is the pressure vessels and internals. Mm-hmm. Then we have TF Industrial, which is maintenance and capital projects, a lot of civil type work and things like that in that realm. And then we have TF Field Services, which is pipelines, mainly for the midstream and upstream market. Then we have TF Electrical, which is instrumentation electrical and works across all the business lines.
And the company just celebrated 10 years.
10 years in business. Yeah, I actually invested in the business in 2018 after I had successfully exited a couple other businesses. And at that time, the business was called Tower Force. Right. So since then, we've developed into TF companies and started the other companies.
So Whitney, you produce a lot of content. You write articles for BIC Magazine, and I wanted to get into something. You said you wrote an article called How to Eliminate Fear in Life and Business. And there's a great quote in an article. You said, faith in the face of fear becomes the driving force toward triumph, demonstrating that a belief in a higher power can eliminate fear, providing the unwavering strength needed to face life's challenges. Elaborate on that, and how does it relate? How does all this relate to each other? Yeah.
So, without some sort of faith, if you're going to be out there having faith in yourself, you're not going to be successful. Humans are going to fail. So you have to find that power outside of yourself to believe in. And especially if you're driving a car 150 miles an hour and you're coming up towards a turn, you're not going to be able to think a lot,
Right.
So, and in business, every day you have a lot of challenges and you're taking a lot of risk. I don't know that a lot of people realize the risk a business owner is taking. He's putting everything on the line for those loans and that money that he's using to try to build this business, and he's taking all the responsibility for anything that happens within that business. So for me, I have to know that, that path is already laid out by somebody, a higher power, and all I'm doing is just playing in it while I'm going along, and I got to have faith in that.
When the article you wrote, it was Racing in Business, a comparative journey. Do you believe that your success in business is tied to racing? Elaborate a little bit more on that risk willingness. Yeah.
Well, so in that article, I talked a little bit about vision. I want to say that something that's really important in business is having the vision and being able to communicate that vision. So in that article, I talk about racing in the rain. That's right. So if you're going to race in the rain, what you want to look at is, so let's say it's pouring down rain and I'm looking down the track. I can see the racing line, but the issue is I have to race opposite of that racing line in order to keep my tires under grip, okay? Very difficult, a lot of skill to do. So, and it's very hard to have that kind of vision. And it's the same thing in business. My father was one that had a terrific vision. He was able to see things way before they happened. And then we were able to execute those visions that he had. So that's what I try to do. And the way I create my own vision is I'm always studying the markets, always learning. I'm always reading BIC Magazine, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and seeing what's going to happen in the future, and then trying to drive towards that.
Since we mentioned your father, Whitney, let's stop there for a second. Jerry Strickland, your dad. I mean, the Strickland family name's been tied to industry for half century. Talk about your dad. What kind of influence did he have on you? And let's get into his role in your life.
Yeah, so I've literally worked for my dad since I was 8 years old. 8 years old, I was at the Gulf Oil Refinery in Port Arthur, Texas, in the refinery. So literally worked for him all the way from 8 years old to about 45 years old. And our relationship was one that he could think of something and say it, and I knew exactly what he was thinking and what he wanted to execute when he said it. So we were constantly talked about business. So very close, even close, so close that actually I talked a little bit about, kind of our recovery and things like that. So close so that we were both recovering alcoholics, and we ended up, at one point, we actually ended up in a treatment center together.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, let's go there for a second, Whitney. So, look, you've been very open about alcoholism, and it's been helping those that suffer through alcoholism. You've dedicated much time to that. One of your big organizations you're affiliated with is the Wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Let's get into that, if you would. Talk about sort of your history with alcoholism and also the Wheelhouse and why that organization is so important to you.
So obviously, as I mentioned before, both my father and I were alcoholics, had a long history of alcoholism in our family. So I was able to quit at a pretty young age. And then what I discovered, actually working for Altair Strickland, I became in HR. I became real involved in hiring people and things like that. And that's kind of how I came across the Wheelhouse. Yeah. And so I started working with the wheelhouse and actually hiring quite a few guys from there. And I tell you, there's not much more of a loyal employee than you giving him a chance, to change his life. So I started getting more and more involved in the wheelhouse. I became chairman over there. It is a sober facility, a treatment center, and a living facility for men suffering from alcoholism and drug addiction. And it's really the only free treatment center on the Gulf Coast. So we have a hell of a good success rate. I think our success rate is still around 63 to 64% that they'll stay a year or more sober if they come through the wheelhouse. So very much a faith-based type place. Very proud of what we've done at the wheelhouse.
Effective program for sure. And the wheelhouse is where? Where are we talking about here in the?
So the wheelhouse is in Deer Park, Texas.
Okay, great. And how long has the wheelhouse been around?
The wheelhouse has been around. Actually, Hub Carroll started it in 1954. So it's been around a long time.
That's incredible. Whitney, tying this all back to industry too, and it's really about people. You've also commented a lot on the relationship between the owner operator and the contractor. And recently, you made some writing, some editorial about the erosion of manufacturers' leverage on contractors. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And where are we at, I guess, right now? And I know you have a lot of experience in this. Talk about that relationship. Where are we now, and where would you like to see this go?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I think the manufacturers are behind the curve right now. I think they're not realizing what's about to happen. So, I had a sales guy come in my office the other day and say that one of our a customer that he visited wanted 120-day payment terms. And it gets me to, and a lot of the things I say in the article, I know it's pretty controversial, but the issue is that if the manufacturers keep on this path, what they're going to end up doing is consolidating all the contractors into very few, very large contractors, and then those manufacturers aren't going to have the leverage that they have now. And I believe that that's about what's about to happen, especially with what's going on in our industry with the reshoring and possibly with this election. Right. It could be we could have way more demand on people than we anticipate.
I love this quote you said: in the intricate dance between major manufacturers and contractors, an imbalance is emerging. For years, contractors have found themselves tethered to agreements laden with clauses that tilt scales heavily in the favor of manufacturers. But
So what I'm advising contractors to do right now is not sign into any long-term contracts.
Gotcha.
So, because I think it's coming.
Well, I appreciate you sharing a little bit about that, and I think what you're saying is pertinent to the time. So, thanks. Well, Whitney, getting to really your front cover spread in Big 2 about TF Companies, it says you've covered how it's all about the people in the past, and of course this issue you're talking about celebrating 10 years. Man, talk about that, all about the people. What's your approach to your people? And a lot of people say that. How do you make that happen?
So a lot of people think that the guys are out there, the craft workers out there, just because of the money.
That's right.
Okay. Now, they want to make the money, but what do they really want? They really want recognition. The whole reason they're chasing the money is because they want the recognition. They want the recognition that they're providing for their family, that they're a good person, that they're a value to society. So I think that's what my father taught me, that we brought into all our businesses, is the person wants recognition. He wants to be told he's doing a good job. That's right. And that creates more loyalty amongst the people, even though maybe I'm not able to pay him as much as some other guy, but if I take care of them and I make sure that they're getting recognition for what they're doing, we're going to do a lot better job.
Yeah, they say 6 kudos to every critique, right?
Exactly.
And I know in my leadership, I always need to do more of that for sure, right?
Yeah.
Be cognizant.
Yeah.
Right. Be cognizant of recognizing people, I think is something that, for me, I have to focus on. So.
Yeah.
Well, Whitney, let's get into one comment you made. You talked a little bit about kind of like reshoring of manufacturing in America. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? I mean, where do we have to, we're getting more macro here, you know what I mean? What are your thoughts on that, and why is this so important really to our infrastructure of what we're facing across the country, from bridges and roads and refineries and facilities? It's kind of on a macro level here. Give me your thoughts on where we are with reshoring and the demands that we're going to have here in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah. So the original reason I invested in Tower Force in 2018 was what I saw was cheap natural gas.
Yep.
Okay, and I don't see natural gas getting any more expensive. I think natural gas is going to be a huge winner in America. So I was thinking, well, okay, the guys to go after is the chemical manufacturers. The European chemical manufacturers are going to move to the U.S. because of the cheap natural gas. And that has played out. We did a huge project for a chemical manufacturer here in the U.S., a European chemical manufacturer. So it has played out. Now, the next thing I'm seeing is power, electricity. So I was at a conference a couple of months ago where there was an announcement of there's going to need to be 35 gigawatts of power built in the United States over the next 5 years to support the data centers, Bitcoin mining, electric cars, you name it. 35 gigawatts. Now think about that for a second, that California is only 14 gigawatts.
Wow,
That's massive. It's a massive number of power that's going to have.
They can't get that from the current. They can't get that from the current grids.
No, it's going to be
new generation.
That's new generation. It's going to have to be every bit of energy is going to have to be on the table. Solar, wind, SMRs, gas, combined
Millions
cycles.
of hamsters spinning wheels. Whatever we need.
Yeah, whatever we need to make power, we're going to have to do it.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Okay, so Whitney, let's wrap up with this, and I appreciate your time. Whitney, you have interests outside of racing and business for folks that maybe don't know everything you do. What would surprise them? What are some things you're into that would surprise people?
So I have made it a little bit public, but I'm very much into the Bitcoin. I believe Bitcoin is a divine intervention on what is I believe, dysfunctional and unfair, evil economic system that we have right now. I believe our government steals money from us through taxes, and they also steal money from us through devaluing the dollar. So anybody who's out there working, making an hourly wage, is getting stolen from every day by their own government. So that's why I'm such a big proponent of Bitcoin and taking that power away from the governments, the control of money from governments.
Well, Whitney, how do we reverse?
Well, I mean, it's going to happen eventually because we're over $30 trillion in debt. So the debt bubble is going to pop one day, and the people who are holding the Bitcoin are going to be the big winners. So.
Whitney, I had a blast hanging out with you, man. I appreciate your candor, and let's do this again.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy.